I never asked to be the responsible son. I don't think any kid really does. It's not like you wake up one morning at 8 years old and decide, hey, I'm going to be the one who fixes everything in this family. But life has a way of making those decisions for you, especially when you grow up in a house where chaos is the default setting and everyone else seems perfectly content to let it stay that way. I'm the oldest of 3. My brother, Mike, is 2 years younger than me, and my sister, Emily, is 5 years younger. My parents, well, they're complicated. My dad, when he was around, was the kind of guy who could fill a room with laughter but also with shouting, depending on the night and how much he'd had to drink. My mom was the quiet type, the sort who would rather let things slide than confront them head-on. If you asked her how she was, she'd always say, fine, even if the house was on fire behind her. From as early as I can remember, I was the one who made sure Mike got to school on time, that Emily had her homework done, that the bills were paid when Dad forgot or when Mom couldn't deal with it right now. I learned how to cook because someone had to. I learned how to talk my way out of late fees with the electric company before I even had a driver's license. I learned how to keep secrets, how to smooth things over, how to make myself small when Dad's temper boiled over, and how to be big enough to protect my siblings when it counted. It wasn't all bad, not all the time. There were good days, days when Dad would take us fishing or Mom would bake her famous apple pie and we'd all eat together, laughing about nothing. But those days were rare, and as I got older, they became rarer still. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a winter coat that never quite comes off, even in the summer. When I left for college, it was on a scholarship I'd fought tooth and nail to get. I remember the night before I left, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the duffel bag I'd packed and repacked a dozen times. Mike came in, eyes red from crying, and asked who would look after him now. I hugged him and told him he'd be okay, that he was tougher than he thought. But I didn't believe it, not really. I knew that with me gone, the delicate balance I'd kept for years was about to tip. College was supposed to be my escape. And in some ways, it was. But even 200 miles away, I couldn't leave my family behind. The calls started coming almost immediately. First, it was Mike, he'd forgotten to pay a bill, could I help? Then it was Mom, Dad had disappeared for a few days again, could I come home next weekend? Emily needed help with her math homework, could I talk her through it over the phone? I tried to set boundaries, but guilt is a powerful thing, especially when it's been woven into you since childhood. I became an expert at juggling. Classes, a part-time job, late-night phone calls with my family, wiring what little money I had home when things got tight. My friends at school thought I was just super responsible, the kind of guy you could count on to organize a study group or remember someone's birthday. They didn't know that I was holding my family together with nothing but duct tape and sheer willpower. After graduation, I moved back home. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. Dad had finally left for good, and Mom was drowning, not just in bills, but in the reality of being a single parent with 2 teenagers and no real job prospects. I got a job at a local insurance agency and started paying rent, groceries, utilities. I drove Mike to his soccer games, helped Emily with her college applications, cooked dinner most nights. I was 22, but I felt 40. For years, this was my life. My siblings grew up and moved out, but somehow, I stayed. I was the one who got the midnight calls when Mike crashed his car or when Emily's boyfriend broke up with her. I was the one who fixed the leaky roof, who negotiated with the bank when Mom fell behind on the mortgage, who made sure there was always food in the fridge. I put off grad school, put off relationships, put off my own dreams because there was always something that needed fixing, someone who needed me. I don't think my family ever really saw me, not the real me, anyway. To them, I was a resource, a safety net, the guy who'd always show up, no matter what. They never asked how I was doing. They never wondered if I was happy. It was just assumed that I'd be there, that I'd handle it, that I'd sacrifice whatever needed sacrificing for the good of the family. And for a long time, I did. Because that's what responsible sons do, right? They put everyone else first. They swallow their own needs, their own pain, their own dreams, and they keep going. But everyone has a breaking point. Mine came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 years ago. I was sitting at my desk at work, staring at a spreadsheet, when my phone buzzed. It was Emily. She was crying, again. Her car had broken down, she was late for work, and could I please send her some money to cover the repairs? I told her I'd see what I could do, even though I'd just paid off one of Mike's credit card bills the week before. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the wall. I felt empty. Hollowed out. That night, I went home and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked. I saw a man in his early 30s with tired eyes and a permanent frown. I saw someone who had spent his whole life taking care of everyone else and had nothing left for himself. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I just stopped. What if I stopped picking up the phone every time they called? What if I stopped sending money, stopped fixing things, stopped being the responsible son? What if, for once, I put myself first? The thought terrified me. But it also felt like relief. I didn't make any big announcements. I didn't stage a dramatic confrontation. I just started saying no. Quietly, at first. When Mike called asking for help with rent, I told him I couldn't. When Mom hinted that she needed help with groceries, I suggested she look into local food banks. When Emily texted about her car, I told her to talk to a mechanic and work out a payment plan. The backlash was immediate. I was called selfish, ungrateful, cold. Mike stopped speaking to me for weeks. Mom sent me guilt-tripping emails about everything she'd done for me. Emily posted passive-aggressive status updates on Facebook. But I held firm. For the first time in my life, I put up boundaries and refused to let them be crossed. It wasn't easy. Some nights, I lay awake, heart pounding, convinced I was a terrible person. But as the weeks passed, something strange happened. I started to feel lighter. I started to remember what it felt like to breathe. And as I watched from a distance, my family, my once tightly knit, codependent family, began to unravel in ways I never expected. I wish I could say that when I stopped carrying my family, they rose to the occasion and figured things out. That's what you hope for, right? That maybe, just maybe, all they needed was a little push to stand on their own. But the reality was messier, much messier. The first real sign that things were changing came from Mike. He'd always had this way of drifting through life, expecting someone else to clean up his messes. When I stopped bailing him out, he spiraled, hard. He lost his apartment within 2 months because he couldn't keep up with rent. He called me, voice thick with anger and desperation, asking how I could just abandon him like that. I told him, as gently as I could, that I loved him but I couldn't keep saving him. "You're not a kid anymore, Mike," I said. "You have to figure things out for yourself." He hung up on me. For weeks, I heard nothing. Then, through the grapevine, meaning, of course, Mom, I learned he was crashing on a friend's couch and working odd jobs. It hurt to know he was struggling, but a part of me, one I wasn't proud of, felt a strange relief. Maybe this was what he needed. Maybe this was what we all needed. Emily was different. She'd always been the baby, the one everyone wanted to protect. She tried a different tactic, guilt. She'd send me long texts about how hard her life was, how no one understood her, how she just needed a little help to get over this rough patch. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, she escalated. She'd call late at night, crying, telling me she felt alone. I listened, I really did, but I stopped offering solutions. I stopped sending money. I started saying things like, "I'm sorry you're going through this. What are you going to do about it?" She hated that. She said I'd changed, that I didn't care anymore. She stopped calling as often. Eventually, she stopped calling altogether. Mom was the hardest. She'd spent her whole life avoiding conflict, letting things slide, but now she was angry. She'd send me emails that read like manifestos, listing every sacrifice she'd ever made for us, every time she'd put herself last. She reminded me of Christmases I barely remembered, of birthdays she'd scraped together gifts for, of nights she'd stayed up late sewing costumes for school plays. She never mentioned the nights she'd locked herself in her room while Dad raged, or the times she'd let me handle things because she couldn't deal. For a while, I tried to respond with empathy. I told her I appreciated everything she'd done, but I needed to live my own life. I told her I wasn't abandoning her, but I couldn't be her crutch anymore. She didn't want to hear it. The emails kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. And then, just like that, it stopped. No more calls. No more texts. No more emails. Weeks went by, then months. The silence was deafening. At first, I thought I'd made a mistake. I missed them, God, I missed them. I missed Mike's dumb jokes, Emily's laugh, Mom's apple pie. I missed being needed, even if it meant being exhausted all the time. I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I should have handled things differently. I wondered if I was the bad guy in my own story. But as time passed, I started to find myself again. I picked up old hobbies, playing guitar, running, reading books that had sat untouched on my shelf for years. I made new friends, started dating, even took a weekend trip by myself just because I could. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. I also started therapy. I'd always thought therapy was for people with real problems, but my therapist helped me see that my whole life had been shaped by a family dynamic that was never healthy to begin with. She taught me about boundaries, about codependency, about the difference between helping and enabling. She told me it was okay to put myself first, that it didn't make me selfish, it made me human. Still, I couldn't help but check in from a distance. I'd scroll through Emily's social media, looking for signs she was okay. I'd ask mutual friends about Mike. I even drove by Mom's house once or twice, just to make sure the lights were on. That's how I found out things were falling apart. Mike was drinking more, getting into fights, losing jobs as quickly as he found them. Emily had dropped out of college and was working at a coffee shop, barely scraping by. Mom had taken out a payday loan to cover the mortgage, and the house was in foreclosure. They weren't talking to each other much, either. The glue that had held us together, me, was gone, and everything was coming undone. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Guilt, of course. Sadness. But also a kind of vindication. For years, I'd warned them that they couldn't keep relying on me, that they needed to learn to stand on their own. They hadn't listened. Now, they were paying the price. I wanted to swoop in and fix everything. It took everything I had not to. I talked about it in therapy, over and over. My therapist asked me what would happen if I did. Would anything really change, she asked. Or would you just end up right back where you started? I knew the answer, but it didn't make it any easier. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was Mike. He sounded different, tired, beaten down, but also, sincere. "Hey, man," he said. "I know I haven't been the best brother. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I get it now. I really do." We talked for hours. He told me about losing his job, about sleeping in his car, about realizing that no one was coming to save him. He said he'd started going to AA, that he was trying to get his life together. He didn't ask for money, didn't ask for help. He just wanted to talk. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Maybe this was what needed to happen. Maybe sometimes you have to let things fall apart so they can be rebuilt, stronger, better. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my family would ever be the same. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with not knowing. I was okay with letting go. Mike's call marked a turning point, not just for him, but for me, too. For the first time, it felt like the wall of resentment and misunderstanding between us had a crack in it. I wasn't naive, I knew one honest conversation wouldn't erase years of old patterns. But it was something. I found myself thinking about him in a different way, not as the reckless little brother I always had to rescue, but as someone fighting his own battles, finally willing to admit he couldn't keep running from them. We started talking more often, but the dynamic had shifted. He didn't ask for money or favors. Sometimes he'd just call to tell me about a meeting at AA, or a new job he was trying out, or how hard it was to stay sober some days. I listened. Sometimes I gave advice, but mostly I just listened. It was new for both of us, this kind of relationship, one based on honesty and choice, not obligation. Emily was a different story. She kept her distance. Through the family grapevine, I heard she'd moved in with a friend and was working 2 jobs. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't even like my posts on social media. I tried reaching out a couple of times, but she never responded. At first, I took it hard. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, wondering where I'd gone wrong, how I could have handled things differently. But therapy helped me see that I couldn't control her feelings, or how she chose to deal with her own pain. All I could do was leave the door open and hope that, when she was ready, she'd walk through it. Mom was the last to break the silence. One evening, months after Mike's call, I got an email from her. It was short, just a few lines, but it hit me harder than I expected. I know things have been hard. I'm sorry for putting so much on your shoulders. I hope you're okay. Love, Mom. There was no mention of the house, or the bills, or the years of unspoken expectations. Just an apology and a hope that I was all right. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at those words. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. I replied, telling her I loved her, that I hoped she was okay too. We started emailing every couple of weeks, nothing deep, just updates, little bits of life. It was awkward at first, but it was real. The house was gone by then. She'd moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, living off Social Security and a part-time job at a library. She didn't ask me for help, and I didn't offer. I think we both knew that if we went back to our old ways, we'd end up right where we started. The funny thing about letting go is that it's both terrifying and freeing. For years, I'd believed that if I didn't hold everything together, it would all fall apart. And it did, at least for a while. But in the wreckage, each of us found something we'd never had before, the chance to figure out who we were without each other's expectations weighing us down. Mike eventually got steady work at a local hardware store. He still struggled, but he was sober, and he was proud of it. We'd meet up for coffee sometimes, and he'd talk about maybe going back to school. Emily, after a long silence, sent me a text on my birthday. Just a simple, "Happy birthday, hope you're well." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I replied, and slowly, over the next year, we rebuilt something, different than before, but maybe healthier. Mom and I never talked about the past in detail. Some things, I think, are better left as they are. But she came to visit once, bringing a pie she'd baked herself. We sat in my apartment, eating in comfortable silence, and for the first time in my life, I felt like her son, not her caretaker, not her safety net, just her son. People talk about family like it's this unbreakable bond, something that will always be there no matter what. But the truth is, families are just people, flawed and fragile and sometimes incapable of giving you what you need. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back and let them fall, even if it breaks your heart. I don't regret being the responsible son. I learned a lot about strength, about love, about sacrifice. But I also learned that you can't save people from themselves, and you can't build your whole life around other people's needs. Sometimes, you have to let go, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. These days, my life is quieter. I have friends, a job I enjoy, a sense of peace I never thought was possible. My family is still there, in their own ways, but the weight of responsibility isn't crushing me anymore. I'm learning, slowly, to just be myself. And for the first time, that feels like enough. It's strange, looking back, how much of my life was defined by the quiet, invisible work of holding everyone else together. For so long, I measured my worth by the problems I solved, the fires I put out, the sacrifices I made. Letting go felt like jumping off a cliff, uncertain, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating. Now, with some distance, I see my family more clearly for who they are, not just people I had to protect, but people with their own strengths, weaknesses, and the right to make their own mistakes. I'm not angry anymore, not at them, not at myself. What happened, happened. We all did the best we could with what we had. Mike is still in recovery. We're not best friends, but we're brothers again. Sometimes we talk about the old days, sometimes we talk about nothing at all. He's learning to live with his choices, just like I am. Emily is still figuring things out. She's more independent than I ever gave her credit for. We text now and then, sometimes even joke about the chaos we grew up in. There's a long way to go, but we're both trying, and that's enough for now. Mom and I have found a fragile peace. We don't revisit the past, but we're present for each other in the ways that count. She's softer now, maybe a little lonelier, but also more real. I visit her sometimes, and we sit together in her small apartment, sharing stories and silence. As for me, I'm still learning what it means to live for myself. I picked up running again, joined a book club, even started dating. I'm not the hero of anyone's story anymore, and that's okay. I'm just a guy, trying to build a life that feels like my own. If you told me years ago that I'd watch my family fall apart and somehow come out stronger, I wouldn't have believed you. But maybe that's what needed to happen. Maybe we all needed to break, just a little, to learn how to stand on our own. I'm not sure what the future holds. Families are messy, complicated things. But for the first time, I'm not afraid to let go of what was, and look forward to what might be. And that, I think, is the real freedom I spent my whole life searching for. There are nights when I sit alone in my small apartment, watching the city lights flicker through my window, and the quiet settles in. Sometimes, the emptiness creeps up on me, especially during the holidays, when everyone else seems wrapped up in the warmth of family traditions. I used to be terrified of loneliness. I thought that if I wasn't the one holding everything together, I'd lose my purpose, my sense of self. But over time, I've realized that some kinds of loneliness aren't just empty spaces, they're room to breathe. Letting go of my family's burdens didn't mean I stopped caring. I still think about them every day. I wonder if Mike made it through another week sober, if Emily is finally finding her footing, if Mom is doing okay in her little apartment. The difference is, I don't feel responsible for fixing everything anymore. I've learned to care without carrying. It's a subtle shift, but it's changed everything. I think about the version of myself from a few years ago, the guy who would drop everything at a moment's notice, the one who never said no, who thought love meant sacrifice without limits. I don't blame him. He did what he had to do to survive, to keep the family from falling apart. But I wish I could tell him that it's okay to let go, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back and let others find their own strength. It's not all peace and closure. Some days, the guilt still sneaks in, whispering that I could have done more, that maybe things would be different if I'd held on just a little longer. But then I remember how heavy that weight was, how it nearly broke me. I remind myself that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself for them. I've started building new routines, little rituals that are just for me. Morning runs in the park, late-night guitar sessions, quiet cups of coffee on my balcony as the sun comes up. I've made new friends, people who know me for who I am now, not who I had to be for my family. I'm learning to let people in, to ask for help when I need it, to trust that I'm enough even when I'm not saving anyone. Every once in a while, I'll get a text from Mike, or a meme from Emily, or a short email from Mom. The conversations aren't always deep, but they're honest. We're all still healing in our own ways, still figuring out what it means to be a family when the old patterns have fallen away. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll grow closer, maybe we'll drift apart again. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of either possibility. I know now that I can stand on my own, that I can love my family without losing myself. And on those quiet nights, when the city is still and the world feels wide open, I feel something I never expected: peace. Not the peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from finally letting go of old roles, old wounds, and the need to be everything for everyone. Just being myself, and knowing that's enough.